Hi everyone, my name is Esther, and I'm a director of growth at Poshmark. I just heard somebody say they just sold something on Poshmark. That's awesome to hear. Poshmark, for those of you who don't know, is the largest social marketplace mobile app where you can buy, sell, and share your fashion and style with others across the country. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about scaling incremental mobile installs through paid social channels. This talk is ideally for companies who already have established a certain level of marketing spend on your typical channels such as Facebook and Instagram, but they're starting to face exponential costs. So the ultimate question that I think we all eventually run into is, how do I continue to scale paid growth on social channels while keeping costs marginal costs manageable? Okay. So before I begin, a little bit about Poshmark and myself for some context. So founded in 2011, Poshmark is a mobile app whose mission is to make shopping simple and fun by connecting people through a shared love of fashion while empowering retail entrepreneurs. We have millions of buyers and over 3 million sellers on the platform, which means about 1 in 50 US women and now a growing number of men are selling on our platform. $4 million worth of inventory are being uploaded into our platform every day. That's the equivalent of like a Nordstrom rack being uploaded on a daily. So that means that, and also our users spend an average about 25 minutes on the app. That's like Facebook level engagement. And we have about 25 million items across 5,000 brands. So for me, myself, I've been in the B2C tech company growth space for pretty much my whole career. So I've seen the UA, the user acquisition and digital marketing landscape evolve quite a bit over that time. And as director of growth at Poshmark, basically I help lead the efforts of acquisition for users onto our platform, both paid and organic. And I've been there for about 4 years, so I've seen it grow quite a bit. In that time, we started from virtually, much smaller than where we are now, to this great scale. And basically, we faced a lot of growth challenges in that time. And one of those growth challenges is basically exponential costs, as we've scaled paid growth as one of our paid engines, or growth engines. So up here you have kind of a tableau of what paid growth looks like. This is a snapshot from one of our high-spending campaigns on Facebook. So as we all know, one of the challenges is as you always run into exponential increasing marginal costs as you scale paid new users. In general, CPMs of a paid campaign increase as you start scaling up on it. That's because typically people try to gain more volume by bidding up and adding more, campaigns onto your paid growth portfolio. That inevitably ends up, as you grow that portfolio, you inevitably end up running into competitors and kind of bidding against competitors and also yourself as you cannibalize your own kind of target audience. So high CPMs eventually means high CPIs or CPAs. In our case, that would be high cost per registered user. So for example here, in campaign X, you can see that as we've scaled in new users and volume, you see our CPM starting to rise exponentially, and you're going to start to see that eventually as we continue down this trajectory, we're going to run into kind of a level of a CPM that is not going to be sustainable, and the ROI is no longer going to back out. So how do you deal with this if all your campaigns eventually go into the stage as you continue down this path? So this is the Poshmark CPM over time, kind of across all our campaigns, across all our social channels. And you can see that we've managed to do a decent job, as noisy as this is, you can see we've managed to do a decent job at maintaining the common pitfalls of CPMs, just, hockey stick going up into the right. The blue line is basically the CPM across our entire paid growth portfolio. And you can see that despite the increase in new user volume, which is the orange line, we've managed to keep it relatively flat, and in some cases, despite the growth, decrease it. So how is this possible? If you're growing your paid growth engines over time, how do you keep costs, i.e. CPMs, low in order to be able to continue to invest in paid growth engines? Specifically for us, that would be paid social channels. to a scalable level and continue to use them as a source of new users. So it's pretty straightforward. Well, I'll be covering, it's not straightforward, but I'll be covering two tactics that should cover what has been successful for us. So mainly it comes down to diversification. We're talking about diversification across channels, or diversification of your channel portfolio, and then diversification within a channel, or intra-channel diversification. And let me jump right into what I mean by that. So first things, diversification across channels is pretty straightforward. Various social channels, we all know, have varying CPMs. Channels such as Facebook and Instagram tend to have pretty high CPMs, and therefore you're going to back out into very high CPIs or CPAs. This is because, for several reasons. One is, when B2C companies start paid growth, the first places they go to are those two channels. So even when you jump in straight away, you're going to be facing incredibly high CPMs. You're competing with pretty much every advertiser, online advertiser in the world. So you're in a bidding war for pretty, I mean, it's a huge universe, but it's a pretty, still, given how many advertisers are on there, it's still a limited ad inventory. And as such, FB and IG, Facebook and Instagram tend to have very high CPMs and therefore high cost of users. You can also see that on the right, so this is our CPMs relative to each other. You can see that on the right there are more smaller channels that have more limited impressions compared to Facebook and Instagram, but still have lower, in some cases less than half the CPMs of Facebook and Instagram, because of the fact that there's less competition. And also, in most cases, for us, we were starting from zero from these channels. Facebook and Instagram has been a paid growth engine for us since the beginning of the company. So when we started with Pinterest or Twitter or Snapchat, we were essentially starting from zero, whereas for Instagram and Facebook, we had already established a certain marketing spend, and we had continued to grow them to the point where our CPMs have gotten incredibly high. So as you can see from this, the next $10,000 that we spend, it should ideally go to the channels on the right, because we're going to get much more bang for our buck and get much more impressions and therefore users, rather than spending it on say, Instagram. Also, this is a testament to how much money Instagram and Facebook make. They make a ton of money. It's amazing. Also, added bonus, whenever you scale on a new channel, not only do you start off kind of with a lower CPM, because again, you're starting from zero, but also you have the added bonus of no ad fatigue, because users on that channel haven't seen your ad yet, and so therefore you're going to have a slight edge on slightly higher conversion rates from the get-go. So in order for us to gain incremental conversion or mobile app installs, we explore these smaller channels and turn to them for new volume, rather than to continue to invest in too heavily. We continue to invest in them, but we avoid investing too heavily on current big channels that have been working for us. And there are channels here that aren't even pictured that have really great CPMs, such as Quora or Reddit or Tinder even, and those are pretty good sources that we're starting to explore now. So ultimately, diversification, so we're going to go back to this first chart that I showed earlier. So diversification of our channel portfolio is what helped us maintain this CPI from shooting up and to the right. And if we go back into this chart, we can see that you can see almost the specific points where we've added new channels, and we see the CPMs drop. So here specifically is, so you see costs rising in the beginning because, again, we were continuing to crank on the paid growth engines that have been constantly working for us, which is, again, Facebook and Instagram. You see costs starting to shoot up. When we added Twitter for MAI ads, you can see, again, where the CPMs drop off. And same story for when we added Pinterest and Snapchat. You can see that, we start to go aggressive on the channels that we have. CPMs start going up because we're bidding up. We're starting to, run into a lot more competition and, kind of start to cannibalize our own campaigns. And then you can see whenever we diversify beyond what we already have, then CPMs start to flatten or drop off. Okay, so diversification, that was diversification across channels. Diversification within channels, I think, can be thought of in the same way. We just talked about how costs rise exponentially when you continue to stick with kind of, if you're a one-trick pony and you just kind of like stick with your same tricks, basically. So when we started in the beginning, Poshmark mainly stuck with MAI static banners. And so our only way of really expanding was basically to continue to bid up on static banners, the campaigns that we already had, or to continue to add more static banners. Eventually, what we found is that Facebook rolled out with a lot more MAI mobile app install ad formats. So we have like video slideshows and carousels and dynamic product ads, or live feed ads, as we call them. So our lesson with this was, if you continue to stick with what you have, then you basically will be starting to inflate your CPM. You can get trapped in a bid up cycle as you basically have bid ups as your only method to gain more eyeballs and impressions on the channels. So there's a lot of ways you can diversify within a channel. I'm going to use ad formats as the specific example, but it depends on the channel that we're talking about. You can be talking about different types of bid models. So for example, using CPA bids, CPM bids, CPC bids, or you can also use creative strategy. You can also use different targeting levers as a way of diversifying within your channel, and as a way to find kind of different methods for expanding for a bigger market share of that channel. When Poshmark first started running Facebook ads, again, we did mainly MAI ads, and we were starting to eventually cannibalize ourselves. And over time, over time we started rolling out with these new formats. In most cases, this is kind of like with the different channels. You could see that this gave us an opportunity to reach inventory that Facebook basically divvies up across all their possible impressions, and find, in most cases, lower CPM inventory. Not the case for DPA. And just as within channel diversification, ad format diversification gave us access to ad inventory with that helped us basically maintain CPM costs. You can see here, kind of really neatly, when we added video slideshow ads, you can see that our CPM drops while our impressions actually see an uptick. So again, diversifying within the channels, whether it could be using different bid models, different targeting levers, or in this example, ad formats, helps us basically avoid the unscalable marginal cost trap. So going back to, just as like a conclusion for this talk, diversification across channels, finding different channels that have more manageable CPMs to increase your paid growth social channel engines, and diversification within channels, using whatever is offered within the channels. I always love talking shop about this and sharing with other people that are facing these kinds of challenges. So if you see me afterwards, please feel free to find me and talk shop. Thank you.